Welcome back to week 5. Our focus this week is on collaboration with colleagues. In this video, I'm going to be setting up the 4 readings on professional collaborations for the week and then going over the continuity and generalization plan. Like our previous weeks, this is a solution-focused class on how we can better advocate for students. The tool that we're discussing this week is collaborations at work. And the essential question is, how can you effectively problem solve with and about school colleagues? Here's what makes special education awesome. You get to go to the bathroom whenever you need because you are almost never alone in a room. And there's always somebody to talk to about how a student is doing. Here's what makes special education not so awesome. The adults who are in your room and that you have to talk to every day about your students. For better or worse, in special education, there is no team of one, which is what the readings and the assignment this week focus on. Before we dive in, I want to start with an acknowledgement. This is peak burnout season. And this week does look like a lot of work, but I promise it is so much less work than it looks like. The readings are super short, 3 pages or less. For the most part, one is 9 pages plus 6 pages of references. And you don't need to turn in a polished assignment. We're going to be workshopping your draft in class next week. All right, the assignment. The assignment for this week is a continuity and generalization plan for a student. Again, you're just turning in a draft of this plan that we're going to workshop in class. The assignment asks you to pick one key skill that your focus student, or if you need a different student, is working on, and to collaborate with families and colleagues on how to build that skill across multiple settings. An example skill might be turning in assignments. You would be talking to the family about Infinite Campus and reminding the student to put their assignments in the backpack. You might be talking to general education teachers about prompting the student to turn in their work. This assignment can be more complicated, but it could also be that simple. You are graded on 3 things. First, you have to plan and discuss what your plan for the student will be, including what key skills the student is working on. It's okay to just turn in bullet point responses for each of these questions. I'm grading on content, not whether you wrote a beautiful essay. Note that parts C to F require you to actually communicate with others. Emails are awesome and an excellent way to communicate, but I would love to see evidence that you have collaborated in other formats as well, whether it was a quick phone call home or stopping by a colleague's classroom before school. Note that the assignment does not specify the number of stakeholders that you talk to because there is no set number, but stakeholders has an S on the end, aka it is a plural. So please talk to at least 2 people, like the general education teacher and the parent, or the speech pathologist and the parent, or all 3, or a paraprofessional, the teacher and the parent. The second thing that you are graded on is actually creating a plan. If the student has an IEP goal on this skill, that is your SMART goal. If the student doesn't have one, you can write a SMART goal for the assignment. However, that's extra work for you, so don't recommend it. Same with progress monitoring. That can just be your IEP benchmarks and objectives. If your IEP benchmarks and objectives are particularly atrocious, however, you might want to write some that are better for this assignment, or just bring your old ones with you next week and we can workshop it. And finally, you are graded on your reflection for the assignment. Please be thoughtful and not trite on this. I have to read everybody's reflection and would like to survive all of these with my eyeballs, my brain, and even hopefully my sanity intact. Note that there is no grading in here on writing. Again, bullet points are totally fine, especially for the draft. If you have any questions on this, let me know. Okay, I want to go through the reading assignments incredibly quickly because they're pretty easy, they're helpful, but they don't actually have a lot of concrete advice for working with and problem solving about colleagues. So I want to get through them so that I can talk a bit about advice and tips. The first reading is a blog post for parents and families on collaborating. Focus on the 2 tips for teachers that are in the middle and skim the rest. It's a short, easy read, but those 2 tips are at the heart of the blog. The second reading is about voc rehab. It kind of looks like a lot, but really it's the half page in the middle and just that chart in the middle that really matters. Voc Rehab primarily comes into play in New Hampshire at the high school level. And here's my blunt assessment. They're a helpful partner in New Hampshire, but they are incredibly hamstrung by our lack of state funding for education. In other states, they do so much more. Here's a couple of examples of things that they actually have done for my students, though. And for one of my girls, they set up a lot of meetings, and then they basically funded driver's ed for her. They were able to pair her with a driver's ed teacher who specializes in kiddos with learning disabilities and kiddos on the spectrum, and that was huge. They've also talked with her about potential scholarships for college. On the other end of the spectrum, Voc Rehab has set up some supported employment opportunities for a couple of my students. And the reading is basically a chart of what they can do pretty quick. Next reading, The Advocate's Guide. This is the second chapter. The focus of this one is on inclusion, but I included it this week because if you look at pages 15 and 16, they've got some nice strategies for inclusion that work well for collaborative teams. Okay, and then the final reading for this week is on 3 different high leverage practices that comes from the Council for Exceptional Children. So the Council for Exceptional Children, or CEC, is the big national organization for special education research and conferences, and the HLPs are their guidebook for the most important things to know in order to do special education well. They are a research organization, though, so that although this was written for teachers, it has a lot of research in it. There are some nuggets in the research sections that are helpful, but the boxes and the summaries right after them tend to be the easiest to read. That's it. That's your last reading. But I want to add on 2 readings, though, so the video is not done. Sorry. I want to zero in on some of the challenges and strategies for working with school-based colleagues. Maybe you teach at a perfect site and everything is sunshine and roses in your interactions with paraprofessionals, general education teachers, and related service providers. Many of us, however, teach at much more flawed sites. Far too many teams that I have worked on look like this. Real dysfunctional. Let's start with general education teachers. First, co-teaching. Co-teaching is an amazing idea in theory. In practice, research shows that it often doesn't work. That's because far too often instruction in co-taught classrooms looks exactly like instruction in single-taught classrooms. There are a lot of models of co-teaching, but what happens far too often is that the general education teacher owns the classroom, teaches the way they always have, and the special education teacher is a glorified, overpaid assistant who hands out pencils and maybe pulls kids out for discipline problems. When co-teaching works, students get more individualized support, more exposure to different instructional models, and a stronger overall educational experience. For my doctoral capstone, I was lucky enough to observe a pair of co-teachers who actually pulled this off. Both had had experiences in the past that had failed miserably. And here's some advice from talking to them and spending far too many hours watching them teach. Okay, the first is not something that you can control at all. You need to be paired with somebody who wants to co-teach. You also need common planning time and ideally similar teaching philosophies. Also, you need to be co-teaching in a subject that you actually know something about. That's an administrative thing, but it is essential for making co-teaching work. Then the rest of the advice really boils down to talk. Talk when the kids are in the room. Talk when they're not in the room. Talk before the school year starts. Even with a perfect pairing of teachers, things are going to make it happen that make you say, huh? And if you don't talk about it, it will fester. The teachers also share that you need to talk about your approaches to teaching and behaviors. Some teachers love quiet, some love chaos. There are all sorts of differences. There are little sheets that you can fill out, but those 2 teachers' advice was just to have those conversations in advance. What does your ideal classroom look like? How do you normally handle X? You might not get on the same wavelength exactly, but at least you are going to know up front what some of the challenges will be and be able to plan for them. And finally, their model didn't actually look like any of the perfect models from a textbook. But what they did was they made a system that worked for them, and that's totally okay. In terms of non-co-teaching relationships with general education teachers, some are easy, some are not. First, Be nice whenever you can. Second, talk to your colleagues for advice. Oftentimes, somebody has the strategies that works with a particular teacher or a good relationship with them. Third, CC your administrator if you need to, but do it as a last resort. I don't have great advice on this because it's hard, but also know that it isn't just you. I have had teachers completely refuse to follow basic accommodations and actually humiliate my students. And I've gotten lots of advice and support over the years on what to do. And the answer is that it's hard and it wound up involving administrators. I had other strategies too, of being really, really nice and helpful when I can to build goodwill, but sometimes things are just hard. If you have specific questions on this, please email them to me or just bring them with you to class next week. Finally, before I let you go, paraprofessionals. Special education in New Hampshire is built on the backs of paraprofessionals, whether they are one-on-ones in classes or being the ones getting the students off of the buses. As a complete aside, there is no set number of paraprofessionals per class or caseload in New Hampshire. Other states do have that, but we don't. And a lot of districts here use far more paraprofessionals than I ever saw in either Virginia or California. But no matter how many you have, it's never going to seem like enough. Paraprofessionals make programs work. Larger groups of paraprofessionals, however, often have their own dynamics. And paraprofessional pay is so low that you often get this mix of incredibly competent people coping with the awful pay and folks who have more challenges of their own. As a second aside, in New Hampshire, paraprofessionals often wear two hats: paraprofessional and rehabilitative assistant. A rehabilitative assistant is a paraprofessional doing a task that is Medicaid reimbursable. That might be feeding a student, supporting behaviors, or supporting social communication. The same paraprofessional might be a rehabilitative assistant from 9 to 10 when they work with a student with higher needs, and a paraprofessional the rest of the day when they are supporting larger groups or in a general education classroom. The key distinctions are that 1, paraprofessionals need to log any part of their day that is Medicaid reimbursable in the Relay system, which is an incredibly annoying portal that eats up all of their time. And 2, paraprofessionals who do Medicaid reimbursable work have to have monthly meetings with the related service provider who is supervising them. It's mostly the speech pathologist. It is not a difference in people between the two roles. The difference is whether the school district thinks they can claw back some money from the state for a particular task that a person is doing. This is totally different than how my old states have handled things, so I wanted to clarify that. And this process is confusing, it is stressful, and it is time-consuming for paraprofessionals. It can also lead to unexpected pushback, like a blanket no when you ask a paraprofessional to work with a different student or to work with 2 students instead of 1. The reason is often because they are worried about messing up the Relay paperwork. If this happens, talk to the related service providers, again, that's mostly speech pathologists, that are supervising them for the reimbursable portion of their time. The SLPs or whoever else it is can do training and support on being more flexible with Relay. A key issue with one-on-ones is this force field. Understanding how Relay works and acknowledging that the system is stressful and confusing can help with the invisible force field and get them to move a little bit further away from that one student. The last thing is to recognize how much paraprofessionals vary in experience. Some have a ton of experience and expertise. Some are brand new and have very little. This can create enormous variations in how they actually work with students and what they do during the day. The more that you can have written procedures and expectations, the better. It makes things easier when people are out, and it starts to level the playing field a bit. Paraprofessionals are not teachers. They should not be designing the curriculum and the lessons. You should. And by having written materials for them, you can prepare them effectively for working with the students, eliminate some of the imbalance between experienced and inexperienced paraprofessionals, and hopefully reduce some of the pushback that you can encounter when you try to change entrenched routines at your school. There is a lot more that I could say on this. Please bring your questions with you to class next week or email them to me because I don't want to waste any more of your time. I know you guys have a ton to do. So I will see you in class next week. Have a great week.